Hey guys, welcome back to SCPod. I'm your host, Dr. Caleb, and joining me today is my co-host.
Hello, I am the co-host.
Does my co-host have a name?
I'm Dr. Zachariah, the
Who
co-host.
has definitely seen some stuff.
It's been a long week, man. It's been a long week. We've been going through D class like fucking nuts, which is surprising.
Well, Dr. Zach, as you know, I've been on medical leave for the last week or so. So what have you been working on?
Well, I'll tell you. I've been covering SCP-871, Object Class, Catter. So, it's been spicy. Each reoccurrence of SCP-871 is to be maintained within a separate, locked concrete cell on a metal platter permanently affixed to the surface of an immovable wooden table. Each cell housing a reoccurrence of SCP-871 is to be monitored on a 24-hour basis via a closed-circuit camera with individual feeds checked about every 15 minutes or so. Upon creation of a new instance of this SCP, 3 D-Class personnel are to be escorted by armed guards to its cell, where they are to be sealed in with the instance and induced to consume it. No more than 1 hour may be spent performing this task. In cases where their additional motivation is needed, the termination of 1 D-Class personnel is authorized. Upon completion of consumption of the instance, no participants may exit the cell until both they and the room have been thoroughly searched to confirm no portions remain. The platter, table, and room are then to be cleansed in preparation of the next instance. D-Class personnel who prove cooperative in the consumption of a new instance may volunteer to participate in additional consumptions. Personnel exhibiting exceptional usefulness may have their monthly termination postponed. Such personnel, under no circumstances, are allowed to interact with any other SCP object. Ever. No desserts of any kind are to be served on site of any facility subject that is hosting one of these instances of SCP-871. Because, problems.
This one
Does this sound
sounds
familiar, Dr. Caleb?
familiar.
Ringing any bells? I've been staring at it flat.
Wait a second. Are you talking about the fucking cakes?
That's the one. All 237 of the fuckers. You think it's easy?
Oh my
You would not
goodness.
believe how difficult it is to force feed cakes to prisoners. But some people, maybe this is they're traumatized from other experiments. But Jesus Christ, I had one guy that would not eat it, and he convinced the other D class, and so we had to go through 2 or 3 squads of the bastards. Cake.
Oh my goodness.
I've never seen someone fight so hard against eat cake.
Let me make sure we're on the let's make sure we're on the same page here. 237 of these things,
Yep.
as of right now.
Right now.
And they take on the form of anything that humanity deems as a cake.
Yep. I have not seen ass yet.
So if I remember right, we have a miniature cupcake as the smallest specimen, right? It's 18 grams or something like that.
Yep.
And then we have the largest one being this 22 kilogram bumkuchen that's 2 meters wide, right?
Yeah, it's a really big fucking bun cake.
Huh.
Imagine a small person's worth of bun cake.
And if I remember right, if it's consumed by a human, another version of the same cake will appear roughly 24 hours after being eaten.
Yep. Fun fact: it doesn't have to be human. It just has to be a living creature.
Well, if I remember right, if it's eaten by a non-human or damaged, another version will appear instantaneously.
Oh shit, you're correct. That was wrong in my notes. I'm gonna fire the intern.
And as far as I remember, and it's been a week, so if you've had a breakthrough, please let me know. But we haven't really found the reason that it replicates, right? We haven't found the means at which it does.
Hey man, it's Keter for a reason. We don't know how this shit works.
And it has been a while. Have we figured out if we can have more of the cake? From what I remember, if more than 10% persists after 24 hours, if more than 10% of the cake persists after 24 hours, it will duplicate, and both cakes will still share the anomalous properties.
Yep, and they will duplicate again.
And we haven't figured out a way to halt this, right?
Sure haven't. That was what I spent the last week doing, and no dice. All I have to show for my work is a bunch of fat D-class with diabetes pending.
Well, have we come up with a plan for what happens if, say, one cake goes unsupervised?
One cake goes unsupervised, and we don't know about it. It could probably multiply for a while, because there's only a set radius this thing can multiply. But if it keeps multiplying and they keep multiplying in that area uncountered, eventually they're going to spill out, and give or take, it'll only take about 80 days left unchecked to sort of kill the Earth with just a sea of cake.
Everything will be cake.
Everything will be drowned in cake.
Wow. I don't envy you.
You know...
I'm glad that you're going on vacation next week.
Yeah, me too. I don't know, I mean, it's like, you think about it, and... we have a lot of things here in the Foundation that are considerably dangerous. You know, we have the old man, we have the sculpture, which we talked about last week, and we have, of course, the lizard, we have horrible, horrible things. You don't think about cake. And I feel like this goes to show you that just because something seems mundane, is that it can't be wildly dangerous if left to its own devices. Like, yeah, there's so many things I can think of off the top of my head that are sort of in the same camp of danger that this cake presents, when you wouldn't necessarily think about it. Until you have millions and millions and millions of tons of cake covering the entirety of North America, it's really hard to run a republic.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to hope that the Secret Service is a fan of cake.
Right, and you think about, like, there's entire regions of the country and the world where if you get too much of any kind of one inclement weather, it'll shut down the area. And we're barely prepared to deal with snow. How do you deal with 18 feet of cake?
I guess it's a whole other different type of icing, huh?
Like, it'd be a good day. It'd be a great day to be a black ant or sugar ant. Like, they'll be fine. Us, not really.
This brings up an interesting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long have these cakes been around? Because I'm thinking about it, and like, were there whole like ancient civilizations that, we thought they were sacrificing people, but really their sacrificial ritual was just eating a cake every fucking day?
I thought about this a little bit ago, and the only thing I can think of is that this has to be a somewhat new anomaly that sort of popped in one day, because if not, I feel like we would already be dead.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is like, either these ancient civilizations like really took their cake eating seriously, or like it has to have, appeared somewhat recently. But at the same time, like, there's all those things, those ancient aliens theorists about like orbs in the sky and stuff like that. Maybe it's these cakes on a platter.
Maybe. I mean, it wouldn't be the dumbest thing we've covered all in our careers. I will say that it's given me, like, it's continued the grand tradition of working with anomalies that give me a brand new phobia. Like, I didn't think it was possible. Like, every time I walk past a bakery now, it's just going to be a case of, like, is there one in there?
You just can't take the smell of baked goods anymore.
Like, no, I never want to smell another cake in my life, just because it's now all I can think about, and all I can think about is cakes destroying the world. Like, this is why we have amnestics.
Speaking of psychological damage, like, I have to imagine, there was that internet trend a few years back of like, is it a cake? And it was like a hyper realistic thing.
Oh god.
And then they cut into it and it's a cake.
That would be the worst.
I have to imagine the psychological damage on these D-class as you like bring them in to eat this cake and it's a dead body.
Oh no,
But then they have to. You're just told to eat it,
right? And then it's like it's red velvet. That's gonna be a problem. Like, if these cakes ever turn into something that looks like that, but it's like a light switch or something, and one of us just misses it until we walk down a hallway one day and it's just a hallway covered in cakes, small pastries that line the walls that look like light switches.
You go to flip a switch and right next to it is an identical switch. You're like, I don't remember that one being there.
Right, like, what if it turns into something else, like into other furniture or something like that? Like, would we even catch it in time? Like, what if what if
Yeah.
it balloons to like several hundred more of these things, and they grow exponentially? How do you get rid of that? Like, some of the D class, like, sure, they like free cake because it's better than some of the other shit we can subject them to. But some of the ones that are rotated in from other assignments or other facilities, they might get suspicious of like, here, eat this, and it's like, this is a power strip.
Yeah.
And like, if then like we run into the problem that I did, whereas you have to you have to terminate several groups of D class because they are wise to some of the things we do here at the Foundation, and that would be a real problem. That would be a real
You know,
problem.
when I first read this file, I thought to myself, like, who would refuse eating cake? And it's like, well, when you eat the same thing, especially something as rich as cake,
Uh,
like, and you have to eat an entire cake in one sitting, and if I remember right, it's like you have to do it within an hour.
just about.
Like, and you have this whole cake. Like, that actually sounds like my own personal hell too.
Well, I mean, if you also think about on top of it, is that like, we see some weird stuff here at work, and if someone at gunpoint tells you to eat something, you're gonna be real suspicious of what they're telling you to eat, because if you think about some of the
Exactly.
other edible SCPs we have floating around here, not all of them do great things to you, or
Yeah.
come from
Yeah.
wholesome sources. And so, like, imagine if like an MTF puts a gun to your head, drives you into one here, and tells you to eat a bunch of cake. You'd be nervous too. I get it. I'm not entirely unsympathetic.
Well, especially if you come from other assignments,
Oh
like
yeah.
you go from like having to deal with eldritch horrors to like, hey, eat this chocolate cake. You're gonna be a little suspicious.
Absolutely. It's like the MTF we sent into the potato dimension, and like they never want to eat mashed potatoes again. And you know what? I get it.
Yeah, it's what classifies as a cake, do you think? Like,
Oh,
obviously we have record of all 237 cakes that we have currently, but like,
I
do you think
kind of want to get my.
it could morph into a pancake?
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna ask that you not start specifying the examples because I'm kind of afraid that speaking examples of what constitutes a cake may have some sort of effect on what it manifests as.
What about Twinkies?
Ag-
Like zebra
Again, I'm
cakes?
kind of terrified because if we start speaking these out loud, it might affect how these things start manifesting, which would be useful for research purposes. But if I would feel bad for the guy that took over the assignment because if something that comes in as a cake that isn't considered a cake, that might skew what they're looking for. And I wonder how that works. So, like, if we perceive, like, if we all decided tomorrow that that something is a cake, is it? Because that's how taxonomy works, and for the most part, it's what we collectively agree is something. So, if something non-standard
Yeah.
comes into a research setting, and you're not looking for it, you might miss it. Until again, it's the light switch cake problem in the hallway. Like, if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it necessarily. So
Yeah.
to break that own taboo, like maybe maybe one of us does consider like a nondescript pastry that you might find at a convenience store cake, and it's not something that we're not necessarily looking for. And so maybe someone eats something in a break room, and because they found it there, and like, oh, free pastry, and they leave it there. They don't eat it all the way, say leaving more than 10% there in the break room until there's two of them, then
Right.
four of them.
Well, and then like, you have different definitions that you can do. It reminds me of the whole like, is it a soup or a broth
Yeah.
argument? You know, but like, or do you go by like dictionary definition of like a cake is a pastry that is sweet, and then it's like, okay, does Nutella toast
Yeah.
classify as cake?
Great. And so like I may email the current researcher on it again, which is with that idea because again we don't necessarily know how these things replicate or what the taxonomy is for what it replicates into. And so that's why I kind of want to keep my power to super dry on it, just because if it changes and we're not ready for the change, if we're not noticing the change, we don't have a lot of time before it becomes a real problem. And I feel like this kind of goes into the greater problem of the misconception about you know what constitutes danger. And like the monsters that we see on a regular basis or here in the database a lot, sure, there are some SCPs that will attack you if you even know they exist. There are some SCPs that are literal kaiju, and there are some that are diseases. But what you don't see coming is stuff like this, where in less than In less than a financial quarter, this cake would destroy the world if left unchecked.
Yeah.
Like, if if we did this on a day where a company had to release its financial earnings for a quarter, before the next earnings call, this cake would have already destroyed the world, or
seriously.
already rendered large portions of it uninhabitable.
We would be drowning in cake.
We would be drowning in cake. And so, sure, it's easy to laugh at something like this and like, oh yeah, it's just cake. What's the danger? The danger's not in one of them; it's in millions of it, and that's what you're kind of.
It's in the math of exponents.
You're dealing with exponential curved math, and it's just nuts. And so,
and let me tell you, as somebody that barely graduated high school, exponents are scary.
they can be depending on what you're talking about. In this case, oh yeah.
So, I have a question for you,
Shoot.
and this will lead into another question.
Okay.
When the cakes replicate, do candles that are on the cake also replicate?
I'm not gonna lie, we didn't test that. We didn't want to add. We didn't see any with candles on them. But I imagine they would, as long as they were part of the original without duplicated. But that's untested.
So my follow-up question is,
That's untested.
there are certain cakes that are created that maybe house an individual in them for bachelor parties, things like that. Would the individual in these cakes replicate?
I hope not, and I hope I never have to find out. Because, again,
Well, as a fellow researcher of the facility, we do have to ask these questions.
we do, and maybe as a researcher with a bit more of my humanity than most, I realize that we would have to, because the stipulation is that if more than 10% of a cake remains or is damaged by any means other than being consumed by a human being, is that this would result in a lot of cannibalism.
Yeah, it's not an easy question to ask and think about, but
I mean, if it comes down to it, like,
for the sake of
if
humanity,
it comes down for the sake of humanity, then yeah, of course, we're gonna have a bunch of D-class eat a bunch of people. That's just kind of how that goes until we can figure out the best things. But that's why we have an ethics committee, and I would definitely defer to them on that, because I feel like forced cannibalism is one of those things they'll definitely have a problem with if we can't figure something else out. But I could be wrong. But to date, I want to go ahead and say on record, we have not dealt with this problem, and I hope we don't have to.
well, then I hope that while you're on vacation, the researcher in charge of 871 will do a good job.
That sounds like
for all of our sakes.
That sounds like a them problem, but me too. Fucking cakes. I'm done with pastries. I never want to see a pastry again in my life.
I just had another thought.
Okay.
What if we take the cakes, shovel them into a furnace? They would instantly replicate, right?
More or less, yeah. They're not necessarily in the same spot.
So could we solve the fuel crisis?
Oh. Could we solve the fuel crisis with infinite cakes in a furnace?
Yeah.
No, because the energy you would get from infinitely burning cakes still would be enough to power the world. Because it's still, like, I feel like the amount of energy you would get from burning this infinite cake, because again, at one time there's only 237 of these things, so I feel like that's not enough cake to power an equivalent engine or reactor or burning any other fuel of similar amount would give you more. So like locally for a building, maybe, sure, assuming they all respawn at the same point, because otherwise you're just still walking around hunting for cake.
Yeah, I mean, like, we have some sort of idea on where they will duplicate or replicate to,
roughly,
because we keep them in these concrete cells.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting because, like, you have an infinite amount of matter that you could break down and turn into energy. And while it's probably not as good as, like, burning coal or something like that, like, it is renewable.
It is renewable, but you still have to think about the output, because you're still only ever going to be burning that many number of cakes per time. So, I mean, this cake would not solve the energy crisis in the same way it couldn't solve global hunger. There's only going to be only X number of cakes at each time. And in this case, X equals 237.
Right. And even though they come back instantaneously, like, there's only so fast that you could pump them in, and they're probably not doing enough. Now, if you let them replicate a few times, a few generations.
Yeah, but I feel
that might get dangerous.
As someone who's come off this assignment, I'd rather not let these things replicate, and I don't think anyone who's responsible for them would let them replicate, just because you only have to screw up once or twice for that to become a real problem.
Yeah, I'm kind of hungry.
I'm not.
Dr. Zach, what cake would you be if you could be a cake?
Oh God, to be honest, I'm really partial to yellow cake with fudge frosting.
Okay. I think I would have to go with like carrot cake or like zebra cake. I grew up eating zebra cakes, and I feel like I'm at least 10% zebra cake already.
I can get behind zebra cakes more than get behind carrot cake, just because the idea of adding vegetables to cake is important to me.
Yeah, it definitely, as somebody that really enjoys carrot cake, I don't think about the fact that there's actual carrots in it. I just think about like the frosting carrot that they usually put on there.
I don't know. I honestly mostly eat like a 5-year-old if left to my own devices, and so it's a case of just like, I don't want vegetables in my cake.
Yeah.
Judge me all you like.
Huh.
God.
When was the this is an SCP that you kind of brought to my attention a few weeks ago, but when was the first time that you heard about this SCP? What was your take? It was when I first take on the cake.
It was roughly when I first started and brought it onto the foundation, and it was one of those things where you're like, how dangerous can cake be? And it was one of the other researchers kind of looked at me for a second, and they're like, and they sort of really explained to me what the problem was with the cake, and it's kind of touching on what when we started talking today, is it's not a problem until you think about all the ramifications of it, where it's like, how can a society run when everything is buried in like 5 feet of cake for like a 60 square mile radius, and then it doubles every day? And so early on, and I thought it was like, oh, okay, cake, lol, it's not that bad, until it's explained to you. And so I honestly think about 871 the same way that I think about all the other ketters that we sometimes deal with, is that it's a real fucking problem.
Yeah. And I was rereading the article or the file on this, and I noticed that there isn't an XK end of the world scenario attached to this. And
there should be.
I think that's really interesting considering, yeah, exactly. Like within 80 days of being unchecked, one cake can end the world.
I mean, I don't know if it...
I should say it wouldn't end the world.
You wish it would. But I mean, I don't know if it's an XK class, but it is a K class situation where...
Yeah.
Like, you get to a point where there's more cake than the combined total biomass of Earth could reasonably eat before it duplicated again. Because even if we get to that 80-day point and we figure out a way to eliminate it, or at least deal with that amount, most of that's going to duplicate. And so then you have more cake than we could eat at that point. And so, yeah, we would basically have to leave the planet. Or, like, incinerate the surface just to get rid of the fucking cakes. And even then, that wouldn't work on it because as a non-human destruction,
they would reappear. Yeah. I am
taking amnestics after this. I don't want to deal with this cake anymore. Like, of all the things I've dealt with over the course of my career, I'm going to add this cake to the list of my most unpleasant ones. Just because, I don't know, the smell of it now. The smell of it, realizing what it is and how dangerous it is. I don't want to have nightmares of my world being ended by cake. Like, I will take the lizard over the cake. Because
that's interesting.
I can cognitively understand being destroyed by a giant monster, by, great value Godzilla. But I don't think I could tolerate knowing the fact that my world could be destroyed by infinite cake.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making light of it, but and it's because it's funny, but like at the end of the day, it is very much like it is this terrifying thing that can happen just based off of like something super mundane. Like, credit to the facility for understanding the threat that this caused pretty quickly, all things considered.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, the lizard is easier to understand that, like, hey, this thing wants to fuck us up. We don't know what motivations these cakes have.
We don't know if there are motivations. We don't even know how this thing came in. Like, we just had cake one day. I'm sure someone knows. Someone was the first one to find it, but I mean...
I have to imagine it's like, somebody brought in like a cake from and left it in the fridge, and then they ate it for lunch, and then the next day the cake was back, and they were like, that doesn't seem right.
Like that sounds about right.
It was bitten by a radioactive cake.
It's right, with great confectioner sugar comes great responsibility. God, yeah. And that's probably as close to true as we need it to be for this case, because honestly, strictly speaking, our job isn't necessarily to always understand. Our job is to lock these things up and make sure they don't kill us all. Like, yeah, we secure, we contain, we protect, and we try to understand what it is we can, but at the end of the day, that's also not our job.
Exactly.
At least that's not my job.
And it is entertaining to ask the what ifs about these kind of things. But at the end, sometimes it's like, what ifs? Maybe there's not really a reason to what if these things.
Yeah, and sometimes the why also at the end of the day doesn't necessarily matter. Like the why the lizard, for instance, is because that's an easy example to reach to. Like why the lizard wants to kill us isn't really important at the end of the day. Why the sculpture snaps next to Infinite D class isn't necessarily important at the end of the day. We just have to make sure they don't.
Exactly. I had this chocolatey Claire on my desk.
Oh.
And I'm not. No. It says I can't serve any cake or desserts on the facility. I was like, wait, did I just break protocol?
Yeah, I was honestly. I'm not gonna lie. Like, if I see random cake lying around my house now, I'm just gonna be real nervous about it.
Oh, you're just gonna start fever dreaming cakes?
Don't. Okay, like I said, amnestics. After we get off this meeting, amnestics.
Have you ever eaten one of the cakes?
No. I have a general rule about not eating any SCPs just because I feel like that could be a really good way to fuck yourself up forever.
Not since the accident?
No, not since the accident. Like I said, it's just... I don't like touching or even being in the same room as an SCP if I can help it. Like, thank God for closed-circuit television. But, like, yeah... Especially around ketters. Like, again, this is just cake, but I mean, it's also ketter, and so I feel like you have to entrust that with, like, a certain level of respect.
Yeah, I can't...
we have D-class for a reason.
I can't imagine being around an SCP for any amount of time.
Like, again, even if you it's safe on paper. Not me.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's, like, one of your best friends, and you find out that they're an SCP or something, like...
In the box.
I think I would just have to be done with them.
Yeah, like I will call a on-site supervisor. I will organize the MTF, and then sorry, John, into the box. It really is for your own good.
We should get a cake to celebrate.
You first. If you mail me a cake, I will consider it a death threat.
The Unicaker.
The Unibaker. The Unibaker.
Oh no! How can I not see that?
Oh God!
No, I'm so upset I didn't see that one coming.
The Unibaker. I'm gonna retire on that. Oh God.
Oh man.
So
what else is there to say about cakes that replicate, man?
Eat them. Eat them quickly and make sure at least less than 10% of it remains.
It would be a disservice to people listening to the podcast without, at least mentioning this, but like these cakes are not lies.
These cakes are real. They are problems. And if you see a cake in the wild, you should eat at least 95% of it. Just shove it in your mouth. Your society will thank you.
God, could you imagine being the D class that has to work with the 2-meter cake?
That's why you send in 3 or 4 of them.
That's just like, oh my goodness.
Like, we provide fiber. There's lots of water. It shouldn't be a problem. It's at the end of the day, it's just eating cake. It's just a lot of cake.
It's like man versus food, but the food just doesn't stop coming, and it doesn't stop coming.
Yeah, it's like man versus food. If you, at the end of the episode, they figure out if the world's gonna end or not.
And you don't get a cool T-shirt. You just get shot.
Yeah. It'd be a weird episode of Man vs. Food. Let's leave it there.
Yeah, it's the secret lost episode.
Yeah, maybe that's why that stopped. Huh. That would do it. I don't think I have anything more about it, add about cake.
Yeah, I mean, it's
What can you say?
interesting.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's well, and I think it's interesting from like you know, we've talked about how cake can be so mundane,
Yeah.
but like be this world-ending threat and everything, and it's interesting, and I think it's cool from the SCP perspective of like it's not a monster, you know. It's not something that you can recognize as a threat.
It's not a literal dragon, but it is a metaphorical one.
Yeah, yeah, and you know when we talked about what we should cover and everything, and we wanted to cover like the coziest looking keter that there could be, you know, like this it takes the cake.
Well, that makes up for the Unibaker loss. So I think this is a good note to end on as there is.
As much of a good note that you can end on when it comes to SCPs. Well, Dr. Zach, thank you for your service to the SCP Foundation and for keeping our world decently cake free for another 80 days.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and if there's any consolation to me, I tell that your next assignment is going to be supremely unpleasant.
Yeah, I think I might want the world to be covered in cake. At least I could sleep on those.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, in the meantime, Dr. Zach, where can our lovely audience find you at?
You can find me at my writing blog, which is www.rollforwriting.blogspot.com for weekly short story fiction and world building projects, and the occasional article about gaming discourse in the news.
Nice. And you can find me at Calica1738 on Twitter /X and Instagram. And you can follow the podcast at SCPod.cast on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, you know, try to stay away from sweets. And next week, we're covering not a great one. We're going to be covering SCP-072. And yeah, that's where I'll be in the meantime. So wish me luck, and thanks for listening, guys, and I will hopefully see you next time.
Sweet dreams, Dr. Caleb.